Hi, Assalamualaikum. We are the student of Industrial Hygiene and Safety Technology. As the assessment team, would like to present the Chemical Head Risk Assessment (CHRA) that has been conducted by us at Block D Makmal Kimia Am 1 of Faculty Applied Science UiTM Shah Alam, Selangor. First, UiTM is one of the largest institutions that established on 1956, which provide more than 500 academic programs in English ranging from undergraduates to postgraduates level. In 2014, UiTM has been awarded as the Best Performing Institute with global ranking of 168 of Best University in Asia. Facts about UiTM: it provides a lot of facility for student present. The facilities that commonly used by the UiTM students are library, cafeteria, and also laboratory. So in this presentation, we would like to talk about the CHRA that we have been conducted at Makmal Kimia Am 1 of Faculty Applied Science. These are the table of content that we will explain during our presentation. 1.0 is introduction, 2.0 is process and work unit description, 3.0 is assessment methodology, 4.0 is assessment findings, 5.0 is particular of assessor, 6.0 is discussion, 7.0 is the conclusion, and last but not least, the recommendation on action to be taken for 8.0. In this presentation, we have been conducted CHRA qualitatively on 9 to 11 November 2022 at Makmal Kimia Am 1. All information was collected by interviewing the lab assistant, which is Puan Nabilah Nudin, which we consider as our work unit. The objective of this assessment are to assess the risk to health of the work unit at the workplace. Our main activities of our assessment are to identify the hazardous chemical at workplace and verifying the chemicals through the XCS. These are the main objectives of CHRA. A. To identify the hazard posed by each chemical substance used, stored, handled, or transported within the place of work. B is to evaluate the degree of exposure of employee to the chemical hazardous to health, either through the inhalation, skin absorption, or injection. C is to evaluate the adequacy of existing control measure. D is to recommend further appropriate control measure to prevent or reduce risk. During the assessment, we have choose 3 chemicals which consist one mixture and also 2 substances to be analyzed in this assessment. These chemicals are hexane, M-phenylenediamine, and gallic acid. From the assessment conducted, we can say that the chemicals used in this workplace are rated as action priority 2 AP2, which the risk rating RR are less than 15, that indicates the work unit is posed to moderate risk level of chemicals. This assessment's recommendation to reduce the risk of exposure of work unit are to follow the hierarchy of control, which consists of elimination, substitution, isolation, engineering controls, and also PPEs. This method is including the general use of appropriate PPEs through training, conducting general ventilation, exhaust fan, inspection of workplace, and also conduct chemical exposure for non-chemical if necessary. Medical health surveillance, emergency response plan, and first aid procedure also should be prioritized for work unit. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and a very good evening. Hi, my name is Firdaus Iman bin Shahali Muda from the group of AS239 1B. Basically, my teams and I have conducted chemical hazard risk assessment at Makmal Kimia Am 1 in UiTM Shah Alam on 9 November until 11 November. So today I will be covering the part of 2.0 process and work unit description. Below the major title, which is the process and work unit description, we have two major chapter or two major points, which is the general description and work unit description. So we will go through the general description of the process first. Makmal Kimia Am 1 is a chemical laboratory which provides laboratory session for the applied science student. The laboratory indicate the process of receiving the chemicals from the supplier until the process of housekeeping. The process flowchart are shown below, which is first, the laboratory will receive chemicals from the suppliers. So from that, the laboratory assistant will conduct a chemical storaging processes. Next, the briefing session for the student, which is the within the laboratory session for the student, will be conducted by the lecturer or the laboratory assistant to give them the purpose and objective of the experiments that will be done by them on that day. Next, the raw materials, which is the raw chemicals, will be collected by the students. Next, the preparation of the chemicals. Next, the experiment session that will be conducted by the students. And last but not least, the waste handling and housekeeping session, which will be conducted by the laboratory assistant with the assist from the student itself. Next, we will go through the continuous slide for the general description of the process. The process flowchart indicates the daily routine of the laboratory session. So all the process complies with the chemical hazardous to health in usage regulation 2000s. So most of the chemical used for laboratory session processes. Next, students use the laboratory to conduct experiment and research based on general chemical that they have studied theoretically in the classes. So we have done for the part of general description of the processes. Next, we will go through the second point or second major topic for the description, which is the process and work unit description. Alright, so we will go through the 2.1.2, which is the description of the process which involves chemicals. So from our survey or from our walkthrough inspection and the study of the process, which is by interviewing the laboratory assistant prior with the laboratory, we can find that student involvement categorized as non-routine work by the referencing the chemical hazard risk assessment on page 23. So next, laboratory was observed to be in work area with the work unit. The most chemical exposed are during the laboratory housekeeping session. The most likely point of contact are when handling the chemical waste. The chemical used is stored at designated chemical storage, as the picture on the left hand side shown. The frequency of maintenance is infrequent, ranging from once in 1 year to 2 years per maintenance. Next, schedule waste is stored at the back of the laboratory, and general safety, including safety practices, instruction, medical surveillance program, need to be improved by the employers, which is the UiTM. Next, for the continuous part of description process, which involves chemical, the waste corner section is recommended to be improvised according to DOE regulation. So from our walkthrough inspection, there is no Schedule 7 is found to be on display. Next, the emergency shower is provided and well functioning at the back of the laboratory. So from our assessment, it is recommended to the employers for shorten the maintenance span for the fume hood, ventilation system and the chimney to prevent the chemicals airborne from exposed directly to the employees and community within the areas. So we have done for the 2.1, which is the general description. Next, we will go through the 2.2 section, which is work unit description. So, from the slide, we can determine that the work unit that we have determined is laboratory assistant worker. So the number of the chemical will be 3, and the description of the work unit is to conduct experiment session with applied science student, and last, cleaning chemical waste. So from our research and from our interview session, we find that the working hours are from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday to Friday with 2 days off. The rest periods are from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. on weekdays and from 12:15 p.m. to 2:45 p.m. on Fridays. So that's all. Thank you.
Hello and Assalamualaikum. My name is Aiman Hatim bin Amir Nuddin. I'm from AS239. So the purpose I made this video is to talk about my finding assessment for my CHRA report. For finding assessment part, I managed to come out with 3 subtopics, which is for the first one is result of hazard determination. It will display the table B1 and the table B2. For the second one is results of exposure determination, table C1, and for the last one is conclusion. Before that, during the assessment work carried out, one work unit have been identified along with 6 hazardous chemicals has been assessed. For the assessment findings at Makmal Kimia Am 1, Block D, we managed to summarize the hazardous chemical that has been used, level of risk, adequacy of existing control measure, and the action priority for the technical control measure. For action priority, there are 3 levels. For the first one is AP1, second one is AP2, and the third one is AP3. The AP1 is where the RR is at above 15, and it's mean inadequate control measure or where the HR or ER could not be determined. For action priority 2, AP2, can be described as where the RR is less than 15 and inadequate control measure. For the last one is action priority 3, AP3, where there are adequate control measures irrespective of the RR. Now, let's take a look at result of hazard determination. Hazard rating HR for every chemical identified in this assessment shown in the form B below, and please refer to the appendices. To summarize all findings, all information were tabulated in the table below. For number 1, the name of chemical is phenylenediamine. The hazardous ingredient is M-phenylenediamine, and the physical form is flakes. For hazard classification, we have acute toxicity oral at category 3, acute toxicity inhalation in category 3, acute toxicity dermal in category 3, eye damage or irritation in category 2, skin sensitization category 1, and the last one is germ mutagenicity in category 2. So for the hash code, we have hash 301, hash 331, hash 311, hash 319, hash 317, and hash 341. For the phenylenediamine, the source of information comes from the SDS. Meanwhile, the HR hazard rating is 1. For dermal is yes, and for injection is no. For number 2, we have gallic acid for the name of chemical. The hazardous ingredient is 3,4,5-trihydroxybenzoic acid. Physical form is powder. So for the hazard classification, we have skin corrosion or irritation category 2 with the hash code of hash 315. The next one is serious eye damage or irritation in category 2 with the hash code of hash 319. For the last hazard classification is specific target organ toxicity, single exposure category 3, respiratory system with the hash code of hash 335. So for the gallic acid, the source of information comes from the SDS with the HR of 3 with the dermal, and the injection is yes. For the last one is hexane with the several hazardous ingredients such as N-hexane, hexane isomers, methyl cyclopentane, 2-methylpentane, and 3-methylpentane. The physical form of hexane is in liquid. There are many types of hazard classification for hexane based on the hazardous ingredient, but I will not highlight all of the hazard classification, but I will highlight the three earlier. For the first one is skin corrosion or irritation, category 2 with the hash code #315. Second one is STOT-SE, category 3, #336. And the last one is STOT-RE, category 2 with the hash code of #373. So the source of information comes from the SDS with the HR is 3, and for the dermal is yes, and the injection is no. Now we go for the second table, which is results of exposure assessment. This table shows the exposure rating for all chemicals. As you can see, we have three job or tasks. For the first one is specimen received and registered. The name of chemical is phenylethylamine. FR, DR, and FDR is in level 2. For the PEL is 0.1 ppm. Degree of release or exposure level is low. Degree of chemical inhale is moderate. The MR, ER, and RR is in level 2, but the HR is in level 1. So the risk level we conclude as low. For the second job task is lab session, experiment of total phenolic content of spice extract. The name of chemical is gallic acid, with the FR, DR, and FDR at level 3, with the PEL is not available. The degree of release or exposure level is high. Degree of chemical inhale is high too. And the MR and ER is in level 2, but the HR is 3, and the last one RR is in level 6. So the risk level is low. For the last job or task is lab station, experiment simple and fractional distillation. The name of chemical is hexane. The FR, DR, and FDR is in level 3. The PEL actually have 3, and hexane is 50 ppm. For the hexane isomer is 500 ppm, and the last one 3-methylpentane with 500 ppm. So for the degree of release or exposure level and degree of chemical inhale is in moderate, and the MR, ER, and HR is in level 3, but the RR is in level 9. So we can conclude the risk level is moderate. Last but not least, by referring the table above, we can conclude that the laboratory lab technician at Makmal Kimia Am 1 is posed a low risk where action priority AP are adequate in the range of level AP3. So I guess that's all from me. Thank you.
Hi, my name is CHRA and I will present about assessment methodology. The step in doing the chemical health risk assessment is accordance with the CHRA Manual 2017 and involve 10 CHRA steps, which is gather information, divide into work unit, determine degree of hazard of CHTH in each work unit, evaluate exposure from all possible route of exposure, determine level of risk, adequacy of existing control measure, conclude assessment, identify action to be taken, recommendation and assign action priority, and prepare, present, and submit report. For gather information, assessors perform initial visit to the workplace to identify all relevant information about chemicals that can be hazardous to health that used in the workplace. The information that has been gathered also include layout plan of workplace, process flow chart, workers at risk, engineering control equipment, accidents and incidents, personal exposure monitoring program, health or medical, and many more. Those information was obtained using qualitative assessment through an inspection tour of the workplace, viewing past reports, work procedures, and conduct interview with lab assistant. Number 2 is divide into work unit. Assessors perform an inspection of the workplace where all the chemicals are used, handled, and released into the work environment and divide into work unit that necessary. Work unit is group of workers who believe to be exposed to similar health risks arising from the use of particular CHTH. Number 3 is determine degree of hazard of CHTH in each workplace. All the hazardous chemicals that were used, handled, and released into the workplace are obtained from SDS, safety data sheet, that are provided by the lab assistant. The degree of hazard is determined based on the hazard classification, acute toxicity, or health effect of the CHTH by considering also the route of exposure. Next, evaluate exposure from all possible routes of exposure. The exposure of chemicals to each work unit was assessed by interview and observation using the method table and exposure rating recommended in DOSH guideline on CHRA. Determine level of risk. The level of risk is determined based on the risk rating, which is derived from the hazard rating and exposure rating. The level of risk for dermal exposure is determined based on the information of the hazardous properties, observation on extent of dermal contact, and duration exposure. Assess adequacy of existing control measure is done simultaneously with the exposure evaluation by inspection, checking record on control equipment, and procedure include the use and maintenance of PPE. Equipment maintenance is done through preventive maintenance. However, the equipment to control exposure are not maintained. There are no report of incidents and accidents, no chemical exposure monitoring and LEV testing, and examination being conducted before. Conclude assessment. Assessment is concluded based on the result of the level of risk and the adequacy of existing control measure. The conclusion will be used as a basis to prioritize the action to be taken by employer for controlling the exposure to CHTH. Identify action to be taken. After concluding the assessment, action required for further precaution and improved control measure are made based on conclusion which is addressed in Form D of the assessment. Recommendation and assign action priority. The assessors should assign the action priority on each identified action to be taken. The employee should use the action priority assigned in preparation of the action plan for implementation of the identified control measure. Lastly is prepare, present, and submit report. Assessors have to prepare a well-written report for purpose of following action. Of follow-up action. Review and compliance with legal requirement report is prepared in accordance with the DOSH CHRA Manual 2017.
So for the discussion is we have considered that our chemical which is N-phenylethylamine, gallic acid and hexane can be considered as chemical with moderate risk. It also can cause an adverse health effect towards the person who exposed to the chemical. And we also had given a few ways to control the chemical exposure that can be referred in the recommendation section. And for our work unit, we got the laboratory assistant worker with the current PPE, which is half mask respirator, and 94 mask and 93 glove with lab coat. And we suggest the safety goggle for the suggested PPE. As for the conclusion is, we can analyze that the use of amphenylethylamine, gallic acid and hexane can demonstrate that these compounds do pose serious dangers to the lab employees. So the employer should make the appropriate preparation to limit the employee exposure to the substances. It is the best for all parties to involve to take this issue seriously. As part of the recommendation, we have give for 7 part, which is the number one is technical control, second one is organizational control, the third one is emergency response preparedness, the number four is skin and inhalation, the next one is exposure monitoring and medical surveillance. For the first one is a technical control, which is we follow the hierarchy of the safety. Number two is organizational control, which is we check the hygiene facilities such as risk communication and safe work system. The third one is emergency response preparedness by following the emergency procedure and emergency response. Number four is skin and inhalation, which is we follow the organizational control for the skin and inhalation as the hygiene of the work area. Number five is exposure monitoring, which is we follow the time weight average and short-term exposure limit for the worker. The last one is medical surveillance. For this medical surveillance, we ensure that student and lab assistant that involved in the chemical um, need to perform a medical checkup every 6 months.